Hey, everybody. Welcome to the virtual reality world where we're almost playing Survivor, sponsored by Sales Hacker and Vidyard. This is Richard Harris, your host for today's Sales Hacker webinar, chat, etc. Super duper excited that we've got Dan Wardle. And Dan, I hope I pronounced your last name right.
You
Um,
did.
who is VP of all things revenue, I think, if that's the right title. Also, Lord and Master of Revenue Generation from Vidyard. So we are really happy to have you here. And our goal today is to make sure that we talk about how to use video outside of prospecting, right? We're all sort of learning to use it now. There's, the virtual happy hours and all that, but how do we do this outside of prospecting in a real world? And, how do we also use it in this world that we're all working in? Because I think those are two very different dynamics. So long introduction, but Dan, thank you so much for coming today. And thank you to Vidyard for sponsoring this and giving us some great insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an exciting time to learn how to use video. I feel like I've been talking about this for 8 years, and now everyone's coming to us asking instead of us just telling, which is always nice. And happy to share today how to take it outside of meetings, but also moving into throughout the entire deal cycle, customer management, how to work with your customers using video. Because I think the biggest thing we're all feeling right now is we're pretty sick of being on Zoom for 9 hours. So how can you use video in other ways?
Yeah, I think that's great. Not me, of course. As long as someone's looking at me, of course, I'm thrilled, right? I love that. Because who wouldn't want to look at me all day, right? But just some ground rules for the group. Hey, we are super excited. If you can't tell, there's 200 plus people who've come to this, so we appreciate it. Please feel free to go into the chat, introduce yourself, introduce the name of your company. Rather than saying what your company does, tell us what pain you solve. It's a really different exercise. Don't tell me what you do, tell me what pain you solve. It's a lot more fun. And then by all means, as you have questions, please prompt them throughout, either through the Q&A in the chat. I'll be monitoring both. We will do Q&A at the end, but we certainly want to ask while the iron's hot. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who's going to share his screen, and I know he's got some slides, and we'll go from there, and I'll probably jump in on occasion from time to time.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, so today we'll kind of walk through the basics of video first, and then we'll get into those real specific use cases of how to use video throughout the sales cycle and into customer management, along with a couple of customer spotlights that I always like to share. So to kick things off, right now, I don't know if everyone else is finding this, but I'm finding with everyone, in this situation, there's a lot more prospecting going on, a lot more emails, a lot more phone calls, a lot more social connections. And what you really need to think of is, an email like this is just not going to cut through that noise. There is tons of these in my inbox every day. I've got all these voicemails coming in. I've basically had to turn my phone on silent because we're constantly on these calls, turn notifications off. And what you need to think about is, how do you get these people's attention during this time, and how
Stop
do you
there,
keep
Dan.
them? Yeah.
Dan, go back to that email.
Yeah.
Somebody sent this to you.
Yes.
Oh my
I am
God.
a local PMP certified professional.
So let's talk about that. I just want to hack this down a little bit. So one, it's all about them, right? They're asking you to make a ton of decisions, right? Maybe there's some value add in there, but if anybody's doing this, and I teach this stuff, don't do this, right? They're the only place that I've seen any results in this kind of stuff work is if you're selling to an IT professional. I know this isn't the purpose of this seminar, but I want to tell you, long emails don't tend to work. They do work with IT folks who don't traditionally like talking to salespeople, but they better be value added. They better be about the pains you solve, not what you do. So anyway, go ahead, Dan, take it away.
Yeah. And that is a great point, because there was one customer I talked to, sells to IT professionals that implement database infrastructure, things I just didn't understand at all. And their videos, I was giving them feedback that they were way too long. These videos were like 10, 15 minutes long, and they were sending them in sales emails. But they got views, people engaged with that video because they didn't want to reply. They don't want to book a time with a salesperson. They want to learn about that data infrastructure on their own and then respond. But the best way is they used videos like this to make sure you're interacting and building that relationship. You now know Cole. You feel like you know this gentleman, even though you just got a 30-second video from him. And in this case, that was a prospecting video.
So just to clarify, you sort of seen, like, for certain industries and certain people you sell to, a long explainer video that speaks to their pain may be useful.
It can be. I think you just have to monitor that data to see, okay, I'm sending it out, and if people are only watching 20% on average, then we need to change it. People always ask me, what's the best length of video? It's however long you can keep someone's attention. If you can't keep their attention for 10 seconds, then it needs to be 5 seconds, which probably means your video is just bad and you're boring. But you really need to think, how can I keep somebody's attention? And that's why there's platforms out there in the marketing world that track how long someone's engaged on a website, because that matters. The longer you can keep someone's attention and fill them with knowledge about how you can help them, the better. So it really depends on your industry on how long that video should be.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah. So, why it works, we already talked a little bit about it. It's personal. You're making that genuine connection, especially nowadays when, you can't really see this angle, but if I do this, you can see that I'm in my son Miles's room. And I believe yesterday when I was talking to Richard, he was in his son's room. There were some bunk beds. It's authentic. It's making that personal connection. Now, when we get out of this situation, I wouldn't suggest necessarily to have a background like this. You want to have it a little more professional, but still, you're grabbing that attention and you're making a personal connection with that person. And this goes all the way back to 1964. This was actually a comment that Richard made yesterday, so I wanted to grab a screenshot of it. This is a good Canadian guy like myself who had this message that the medium is the message. The message is the medium. It's not a new thing. There's multiple channels you can communicate people with. Now, Richard, I believe you were saying back when this came out, it would have only been 2 different mediums. There was only newspapers and radio. Well, now we have 50? We can text message a customer. We can do a lot of different things to connect with our customers. And video is another way to do that. And arguably the most impactful way, because you can see the person's body language, you can hear them, you can see their message on the screen, and really get across whatever you need to do with that customer. So how do we do it? What we're going to do now is we'll talk about the different kinds of videos that can be made. So is there a screen share? Is there pre-canned content, like you had mentioned, an explainer video? So we'll go through a couple of those examples. And here's a fun example from someone who used to be on my team. She's actually now at DocuSign, leading the Canadian team for them on how to penetrate into the Canadian market.
Hey, Dan, we got an early question, which I think is great. And I don't know if it's going to be covered, but the question becomes, as we talk about video, right? The concern of that either a link to a video or an actual attachment of a video will send it to a spam folder, right? I think it's probably a fairly common question for what you guys do. So I don't know if you want to address it now, or if you're like, Richard, we got a section on that in a minute. I at least want to make sure we ask the question.
No, that's a great one. And I didn't put that in my presentation today. So essentially the way that we send videos to ensure we're not getting blocked by spam is if you attach a large file, that's a big trigger for spam. So what we do is we have a small lightweight thumbnail that shows in there with the link. That's the best practice to send any kind of video, whether you're screen grabbing from YouTube or using any platform you have today, or a platform like Vidyard. And the key there is really, small image size with a link below. You have to have both. So the image needs to be clickable and the link right below. And the reason for that is there is some enterprises on Outlook and other enterprise grade platforms that basically strip out every image. UPS is one I'm thinking of that strips out every single image. They still ended up using us, but they know that all images, even if it's in the footer of someone's signature, gets stripped out and it shows a little box saying click here to show image. So you lose that immediate effect with a very small percentage of enterprise clients that block the image. So you need to have that link there to ensure you're getting the click through, and reference that it's a video personalized for them in the body of your email, so that they are engaging with that video and willing to watch that.
Great. And just out of curiosity, another question came through the chat is, if it's attached in the email, as you said, or redefine, say, Richard, it's not attached. So is it embedded is it when they click on it, does it pop up in another box? Does it play native into the Outlook, or I mean the Outlook or the Gmail email? Like, again, these are just questions coming from the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of the variety of platforms out there, what it does is it opens up a browser. So different email clients will work in different ways. On your phone, it opens the browser within the email client. On a computer, it would open up Chrome or Safari or whatever you're using, and then it auto plays the video.
So the best practice is that whatever tool you choose, you want to make sure that you've tested it in that capacity to see what it looks like.
Exactly. Make sure it auto plays. You don't want to create that secondary one. So way back in the day, before Vidyard had a platform like this, and we were, mainly for hosting, I would have to, copy a thumbnail, paste it into my email, hyperlink it, and then most video platforms have an autoplay query that you have to put on it, so they don't just autoplay automatically. When you go to YouTube, it doesn't just start playing videos. You have to do like $? Autoplay equals true or something like that to make sure that it plays automatically. You'll get way better engagement if you make sure that the video is playing when that link is clicked.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. So what we'll do here is I'll explain kind of the 4 different types of videos. There's the selfie video, which if you're self-conscious, doesn't feel great to begin with. So this tends to be kind of the thing that you see out there in the wild. You see it on LinkedIn, you see all the influencers walking around using this style of video. For your sales team, this may not be the right kind of video, but it is the most personal. It's great for follow-ups for your calls, for, in deal cycle stuff, because they know you, and now it's just you talking to them as a follow-up instead of having to schedule a meeting, let's say, and we'll give some of those examples later. But another way to start.
Do you think that was and not just Vidyard, but do you think that was sort of video 101, version 1, right? 1.0 was like, hey, hold up a sign with their name on it, right?
Do you know what it is? I'm not on the marketing side, so I can say this. It's the one that looks the best in marketing material. Whereas a screen capture like this, you have to make it generic because you can't make it personal. You just can't, because you don't know who you're sending it to. It's in marketing material. It has to be easily understood by everyone. Whereas I would say probably our customer base, as well as my team, this is probably 80% of their videos is recording their screen. And it becomes personal by what you're recording. So if I'm prospecting Richard, I would start on your website. I would talk about how much video could help your consultancy and your training programs and everything else. And it's personalized because it's your website. Or maybe I start on your LinkedIn profile and reference something that you've written in your profile. So you can make it personal. It's just way harder to do when you're doing marketing like my team does.
All right.
Yeah, so that's why you see it so much more often. Plus, all the influencers like to see themselves, not a screen record. Now, the one thing that a lot of platforms allow you to do is to still have your image show. And so you're still getting that one-to-one human connection, but the main focus of the video is on the screen recording, which is really good. Because then if you are self-conscious, if you're new to video, if you don't have the best lighting, whatever it might be, it's very small and it doesn't matter where you are. You can make that video while recording your screen. The next one is one that quite often gets overlooked, especially as we talk about, our marketing material and what you might see on our website, is using pre-existing content. So if your marketing team already has hundreds of videos, even if they only have one video, but it's like the video you send to everybody, you can still make that personal. So what you can do is send that video, but also record a quick intro, and that's where the webcam would work best, where all you're saying is, hey, Richard, really happy to connect with you today. As I mentioned, here's a recording of how our system could help you. And then it goes into more of like a 5-minute existing demo, or maybe it's a case study, a customer example, whatever it might be. And my account executives, this is basically what they're using all the time, is a quick intro of themselves, followed by whatever their solution consultant has created as a micro demo, is what we call them. We try to keep those micro demos less than 3 minutes.
So I want to sort of go back to top of the funnel, right? So top of the funnel, we talk about, what you're talking now is a little bit more about middle of the funnel, right? So now we're talking about not from the SDR perspective or that part of the sales cycle, the qualifying, but more towards the middle of, in my world, you go from qualifying to discovery. And so you're talking a little bit more about discovery. You uncovered something in a meeting. you traded some information in email, they asked for something, and then you're personalizing it one step deeper, right? Here's an introduction to this video. Here's an introduction. I assume you could kind of do the same thing even for a PDF. Hey, Dan, I attached the PDF below. These are the parts you might want to go take a look at, like, section 2 and 4, or I think the things you're most interested in, making it that level of personalization. Is that where I'm hearing you talk about things?
What I would do in that example is I would actually bring the PDF up on the screen and point to it. Highlight the sections and say it's attached below, so you don't have to like try to read this video, but here's the sections you should look at, and I'll let you get to it. Yeah, cool. Just making that extra little explanation. We do a lot of that with our terms and conditions. So getting beyond the discovery and right down to the end of the deal cycle. Our terms and conditions have a lot of legalese about, we're hosting your video content. So there's some complex things in there that we have to address, a lot like if you ever read YouTube's agreement, which no one does. And so what we have is what we call annotated terms. So we'll make a quick video of our term sheet that says, here's the sections that your legal team is probably going to want to check out. There's notes in the border from our legal team so they can understand what our platform does. And I just wanted to highlight, these are the 3 sections that you'll want to look at, and we can answer questions on.
Cool.
So it's things like that that just really help smooth out and reduce the number of meetings that you're having to do. And that flows really well into the next section. So now it's all about, how does video fit? What's my message in that video? Some of the things we've already talked a little bit about, but let's get much more specific. And also, how do I create those videos so they, look half decent? And then how do I share those and how do I get them to the customer?
Yep. Someone's even asked if you're going to show how to embed. I'm not sure. I'll let you decide, but I don't know that we're getting into a product training, and I assume that's probably on a video, but I at least want to let someone know we got that question from them.
Yeah, and if there's time at the end, I'll show you. It's a simple little button. The other option, like I mentioned, if you don't have a platform like Vidyard, although we do have a free offering, is you just take a screen capture of whatever video you're sending them to, and then hyperlink it to your YouTube channel or wherever that video lives today is an option as well.
Great.
So this setup, this is actually from one of our blog posts. This was one of our content managers' setups of making videos last year. It shows you that even somebody who's, in the video market, on the marketing team, making professional videos for our marketing department, it doesn't mean that we have some crazy setup. It's a nice webcam. It's a nice mic. It's angling the video to be the right height and a lot of things like that. So if I was to rank them, lighting is the most important. Now, you have to actually have a microphone that works, but quality lighting is the hardest part to do. I actually was struggling with that today. I mentioned to Richard when we were prepping before, it's like dark outside today. I don't know what's going on here in Canada. It's just a miserable day. So I've had to arrange a bunch of lights to try to get at least some decent lighting. So that's one. Number 2 is the height. I could probably deal with another few inches up. It should be somewhere, your camera should be right around your head level so that you're getting just the optimal kind of angle and you're not having that nostril view when people are working on the couch. You don't want that. So try to get it up as high as you can. Our office is hilarious with setups like this. We have one guy who's almost 7 feet tall. He's got like 10 different MacBook boxes under his laptop to try to get it up a little bit during calls because his upper body is so tall. It's really, really tough. But whatever you can do to get that proper raise, my setup looks a lot like this right now. I've got a wooden box from Michael's, which has been designed by my 5-year-old to have lots of colors on it, propping my laptop up that extra few inches. So anything you can do to get that is good. Once we get out of the work from home world, the background is ultra important. So, I was mentioning if I continue to work from home while other businesses are back in the office, I'll probably put up a backdrop of some kind or maybe use one of those virtual backgrounds. But I actually find right now in the current situation, having this genuine background where it's just a bunch of my son's stuff is good. It's a conversation starter. It shows that you're human. But in general, you should watch what that background is and don't have a window behind you because that just screws up the lighting. And then lastly, the mic. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. These mics, that's a Yeti mic there. They're really good. I don't go that far. I just have, Apple headphones, whatever it might be. If you're in an office with lots of people around in the future, once we're allowed back, then you'll want to look at noise canceling and make sure that you're not hearing other people, hearing dishes, that kind of thing. It just ruins a video. It's not authentic at that point. It's just annoying.
So I'm going to chime in on this one a little bit because I've got some experience with it. The first thing I'll say is that, so I do this podcast, which I think people know, Surf and Sales. So free plug for me. Max can slap my hand if he wants. But we first started doing this, and I was literally broadcasting from the garage, right? And I was using Zoom, putting in the backdrop. And then I finally said, screw this. This was back in January. I'm like, this is my garage. Like, this is reality. This is my world. This is how I work. And it's funny to me because people were like, well, aren't you concerned about what people think? And I'm like, no, I've never really been concerned about that. Here's my mom's number, ask her. And what I found is that for those who do get super concerned about it, I get it. For those who don't, I appreciate the human aspect of it all. Lighting, I think, is probably important. Camera is a little less important. It just depends on that. But there's a fifth item that I would ask that's about making videos 101. And I might even put this as number one, which is the content. You know what? Lighting, camera angle, background, and mic can't fix shitty content. Sorry. So make sure that you understand what you're trying to do. Back to that original point, the medium is the message. Make sure that you understand what you're trying to come with, right? Because that is exactly what matters the most, is the content. So make sure it's contextual. Make sure it's about the pain you're trying to help them solve, not what you do. But anyway, those are just sort of my 101 additions to you, Dan, Dan. And feel free to disagree with me. So
no, that is bang on. And I think this blog post that I pulled this image from actually explains it really well as well, is not only the content, because people don't always retain exactly what you're saying, but the attitude towards it. If you're just sitting here saying, hey, I really can help your business, no one is going to listen, not a single person. We just had a company-wide Ask Me Anything session, and a couple of presenters were not used to presenting, and you could see that there was just no comments during that section. And then the next section, when Tyler starts talking, all the comments start flying again because he's such an exciting personality. So have some personality, even if you don't, make one, make it a little extra crazy, and don't be worried about what people think, like you said.
Yeah. Let me put it to you this way: nobody gives a shit what we do. They only care what pain we solve for them. Like, they really don't. Nobody cares that Richard's a sales trainer, right? Who cares, right? There's 1,000 of us out there, but they care that I can teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions. Same with Dan. We can teach your team how to be more engaging with your prospects. That's a whole better definition of what Vidyard does than a lot of things, right? So anyway, I'll stop. I'll get off my rant.
No problem. So this is an exercise we go through during launch that I thought was relevant here, and going back to that medium as the message. You've got phone calls, you've got text message, you've got emails, LinkedIn's, other social communications. Now we're adding video to that, and you need to think about where it fits. Whether you're a BDR and you're thinking about your first touch through to the opportunity creation, meeting booking, or you're an account executive thinking of my first meeting through to close, or I'm a CSM thinking of my first communication through to renewal next year. You need to think about where can video fit? How do you mix up that medium to make sure not everyone likes video? Although I pretend everyone loves it, not everyone likes it. So you need to make sure you're mixing it up. There's some of my friends I only communicate through LinkedIn, and there's others that won't respond to me for months. So it just depends on what medium that person, and you need to figure that out with your customers to make sure that you're using the right medium in the right place, whatever kind of deal cycle you're doing. Then you get into, okay, now I kind of have an idea, as an example, Salesforce does not use a video at the beginning of their sales cycle, especially on the inbound team, because it's Salesforce. When somebody requests a demo, they get 4 million of them a year. They have a 20% response rate on the first automated email that is not very good, but 20% response rate is what we're all aiming to get to. So they didn't bother adding complexity there. Their head of SDR is actually a PhD in mathematics. He's never made a phone call before. He couldn't train anyone on how to be a salesperson, but he knows how long it takes him to respond to a first touch. And so they didn't use video at the beginning because they already get 20% response there. But the issue they have is once they've booked the meeting, if it's more than 72 hours away, they only have a 50% attendance rate. So how do I get more people to actually show up for the meeting I just booked? They send a video that morning to make sure people see the human relationship and show up to that meeting. So that's what you really need to think of is, which of these kinds of videos and scenarios are going to help your deal cycle the most.
I think this
So
is
here's
great. I love
just,
the use case. I love talking about specific use cases. So awesome.
yeah. And I think, the selfie intro is the one everyone talks about. But then there's fun things like the contact us request. So my inbound team, we call them concierge. They're not salespeople. They help you figure out where you need to go in the organization and how Vidyard can help you as a business. And so when somebody comes into them, they have this like little game show video, and we change it up every quarter or so. But the first one was basically we have a 5-minute response time. And so while you're waiting for that 5 minutes to pass, you get a video sent to you via email. Thank you for, typical marketing message. Thank you for responding. Hopefully everything's well. And then this video is there saying, it's like a game show. It's like behind door number 1 is concierge Courtney. Behind door number 2 is Katie. And behind door number 3 is Jordan. Which one do you think will be reaching out to you? Check your inbox, and they're probably calling you right now. And so by the time that video plays out, one of us has called you if it's in the office hours. So just using video in a different way to make that connection with a customer, even if you're in an industry, we have a lot of feedback from customers on, oh, I could never do marketing like you because we're in a more traditional industry. That is bullshit. You can have these fun videos. One of my favorite case studies, many, many years ago, 7 years ago now, was Talia. They do an early payment discounting system for CFOs of large enterprise companies like Coca-Cola. I had to look up what that meant when I first started selling to them. It's like pennies, 1% discounts for paying early, stuff that I just didn't even know existed. And they made all these funny videos to try to showcase the fact that they are not just, this laggard company that will help you with your payment transactions. They're there to help your business. So they had all these superheroes of procurement. And it was like Procurement Pete and Payment Susie and all these other like cartoons that showed people how they could actually, get these discounts faster. And the reps were using that to create a relationship, make people laugh, and make that connection during the first few sections of their deal. So there's a few different specific examples. But I think what I want to get into now is the later stage stuff, the meeting follow-ups, the proposal reviews, that kind of stuff, which is where I find video is the best use. Any questions that have come in before we get into that?
No, I think there's been some stuff that I think we've already answered about if the email started in Gmail client, but they're in Outreach. Is there an Outreach integration? Which I think there are plenty of integrations with SalesLoft and Outreach, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, the video button shows up in any of those sales enablement tools. You may just have to ask your administrator to turn it on for you.
Yeah. Someone's asking if you've got samples of the different types of videos. I don't know if you guys have a page that's like, here's how you do one with proposal, and here's how you do one with this, and here's how you. So I don't know if we're going to get into that today, but if not, I think that'd be a good follow-up for some folks.
That's a great follow-up. We call it our Inspiration Hub, and it's just a collection of videos from ourselves and customers on what they've used it for.
So where's the Inspiration Hub if they do want to go see that after this, just while we're taking a second?
I have to double check the link. If you search for Inspiration Hub Vidyard, you'll find it. I think it's okay. inspirationhub.vidyard.com, but we will definitely get that after.
Yep. So someone's asking a question of, making it more interactive where they have to complete a survey within the video. Sounds cool. I don't, you sort of have to earn the right to ask them to do that, but I don't know if that's a feature, but I think it's a good idea that someone should think about. So.
Yeah, we do have that functionality. I would say it's more for marketers. So on our hosting platform, as opposed to our sales platform, where it is an option. To your point, use it in very, very specific ways where you've earned the right. So it's a training video for your customer base. And so they want to continue on. Don't make it where it's like 3 minutes into a webinar recording, you ask them for every piece of information, their SIN number. That's just going to piss them off.
Well, all right, let's go forward with some of these other things.
Cool. So this one we've talked about a lot. I'll probably go through this slide really quick. This is just that connection, even if it is somebody you just talk to, whatever it might be, just make it very personal. And what I mean by make it personal is the thumbnail. So the content after they click is important, but it doesn't matter if your thumbnail doesn't look personal. So there's a couple of little tips and tricks, no matter what platform you're using. Stand off to the side at the beginning and then scroll in once you start playing the video. Otherwise, your face is the play button and nobody will see you. So kind of goes against the point. So stand off to the side when you're first starting to make the video. Have something that shows that person you made the video for them. So whether it's a whiteboard, whether it's, their name, maybe you grab a copy of their logo, maybe you start with screen recording, whatever it is, that thumbnail immediately needs to speak to the person you send it to, and you'll see this 5 times higher in the click-through rate and the response rate on your emails. So really important. Even if the rest of your video sucks, the thumbnail has to be personal. Then we get into the follow-up, and you mentioned this a couple of times. A follow-up to a discovery is typically a 3-page email that no one reads, that looks a lot like that video, that email we checked out earlier. How do we make that shorter? People just can't engage with that long of a piece of content, and they just got off an hour-long call with you. They really don't want to read that follow-up. So what you should do is have a couple of your key points bulleted out, and then a video in there that goes through the rest of it. So the content of your email should just say, here's the 3 big things that you really want to benefit from using Vidyard. Really excited to show those on the next demo. And as mentioned, I've included a video here that is the customer testimonial you wanted to know, and a couple of the other technical points and integration points. And then have a collection of videos that can answer all those questions for them, so they're not having to read through all of your knowledge base articles.
So I'm gonna stop you there for a second and call bullshit on you, Dan. So that first email you showed, absolutely 100% not a good prospecting email. If I did spend an hour on the phone with somebody, I absolutely want the rep to send me that book, right? I want a very clear email, and I teach this, and it works really well. But I love the video aspect. I love what you're talking about. Here are 3 key takeaways. But you should have next steps. You should have the pains you discussed. You should have anything about commercial terms if you discuss them. Any additional information. I absolutely agree that long follow-up email is critical for 2 reasons. One, it's critical for me because let's face it, my memory is not great. But 2, is that information is used and shared throughout the organization, then they can forward that email on to other people. But I do like the video piece, but I'm going to push back on you on that one and you can disagree, but no way I'm going to let that one slide by me.
Yeah, I think that's where you meet in the middle, right? Is instead of having to type out every little detail, that's explained in a video or multiple videos. There's definitely cases where the beginning video is the individual just talking 30 seconds about how great the call was, and then there's a bunch of text that outlines exactly what they need, their KPIs, things that we're going to address for them, links to any technical details they need, and then another video that is the micro demo of that. What we can do there is shorten up that video, shorten up that email, but still have all of the key pieces in there around next steps. And even, we'll get into this, actually, it might be the next one, is in that video, it's driving people to the next step. And it's also enabling them to forward it, to your point, to all of the other people in the organization. You really want to, I'm going to skip to this one. You want to enable your champion so that you're not playing the game of telephone. It's your voice explaining to the rest of their organization why your product is right for them and is going to help them, as opposed to them going back to their boss and saying, oh, I think they can do this. Yeah, I think they said they can do that. No, put the video in there so that they're just showing that video to their CFO or to their VP of sales or whoever it might be. Really making sure that you own that conversation throughout their organization, because we know these people won't join calls, or they'll accept the call and then not show up, is typically when the executive comes into play.
I think that's a great idea. It even gives me the idea of sending a summary video after that first meeting and being able to send it to you and said, hey man, here's a quick video that I think based on our conversation, your CEO might want to see. If you want to forward it to them, feel free to. Right now, to your point of enabling them, letting them do that. I think that's a great idea. I've never thought about that.
Yeah. Now, the biggest one we use for this is not typically just the discovery follow-up. It's later in the deal cycle when we're doing a pricing proposal. So you do all you can to try to make sure that all the key stakeholders are in the room, and you join Zoom and you do your pricing proposal, and then you realize the CFO, whoever didn't show up, and they have to take it back to them anyway. And you're like, right. So that's where you don't just send them the PowerPoint, you make a video of the PowerPoint and send it to them so you know who's engaging with it and where it's going. Even if you're not using Vidyard, at least you'd be able to see how many people are watching the video. How many views are you getting on that private YouTube video or whatever you're using for a video platform, to know that, oh, okay, well, nobody's watching it. So the economic decision maker doesn't even know how much it is. So where are we at in this deal? So you can really then use the data to see if this deal is worth spending time on.
I got a question. I think this is a pretty good one too, which is, how do you, like, all these unique cases, and again, tell me, Dan, hey, Richard, we're going to get to that. But you're giving a lot of power to your sales reps, right? If the messaging isn't crisp coming from management, marketing, et cetera, and it's not sales crisp, you could be making a problem for yourself, right? Don't let your team, quote unquote, create the messaging, or if they do, make sure it's good messaging. But the other question is, with all these videos, how much time should a rep spend making these videos, right? Like I can see some, from the old school world of, oh my gosh, I need them hunting phone numbers, not making videos. And it's like, well, not really. But
Yeah.
how much time should a rep spend on it? What do we need to accept as general quality? I know we talk about lighting and those kinds of things, but from a tactical perspective, is it, hey, if a rep's spending more than 10 minutes to make a follow-up video, that's too long. If a rep's spending too, you know what I mean? Like, do you have any hints on that?
Yeah, and that really business dependent, but I'll give kind of my opinion on it. I've only ever had to do a second take. It basically, once you've done your first 10, 20 videos, you should be comfortable with a mistake. You should be able to continue on. On a phone call, you don't click restart. You just keep going if you make a mistake. And you should do the same in video. I think of it, and I always try to relate it to a voicemail. And back when I first started in sales, there was no video, so I would send and leave a voicemail explaining next steps, explaining what we're trying to do, whatever it might be. It's the same thing, or a detailed email. I almost find there are some reps on my team that their emails are not concise and have a lot of words and very difficult to read. When they come across in a video, it's sharp, it's crisp, it's what we want to get across. But that took a lot of coaching as well. So I think what you need to look at is, how are you going to enable the team? How are you going to make sure that you're reviewing the videos they're making, just like you do on a sales call, just like you would do when you're shadowing a rep going door to door back, when we were allowed to do that to our customers, and really make sure that my rep's message is what I want them to deliver, and it shouldn't be any different in person versus not. So that's that piece. The other piece is, you have to think of how long would it take them to write out a large email, or to, in Salesforce's case, blast out that quick template and get a 20% response rate. To your point, even if they only took 45 seconds to make a video, that's still too long based on the volume. So they just didn't do video in that piece. So you've got to balance that risk and reward, or time spent and reward, similar to an ROI. If I'm only going to get a two times higher response rate, but it takes me 20 minutes to make the video, it's probably not worth it. You need to have that balance in there.
And just out of curiosity, someone asked, it's a great question. Can you tell how much of the video someone's watched if you send it in an email?
With Vidyard, yes. So if you're using our platform, you'll get an email response that says, Scott watched your video 47% or 50% or whatever it might be. So if they've engaged with the whole thing or not.
Got it. Here's another great question. From an audience engagement perspective, right? Can you do something as long as like a live video? And I'm looking at Jory's question is, what is your advice to organize a live visit in our laboratory? And is that tailored to our customers? I think I know the answer, but I want you to answer it if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand. So are they kind of inviting people to come into the laboratory? Is that the idea?
If I understood the question, I'm thinking my head went to like a virtual walkthrough of a home that's for sale, right? How do you invite someone in to see it? To your point about should it be customized for everybody, I think the answer is that depends. I think you should have a generic one, and then you have one that, and explain like, hey, here's the basics of how our lab looks. But then if they need something specific, then you have to ask them what they want to see the most, and then you might need to make that video. But
yeah,
anyway,
and
let's go. I'm just trying to keep on top of the questions a little bit. So
yeah, and that's a good one in general. It's not specific to this answer either with the laboratory, but I'm sure a lot of us usually have customer visits, on sites, things like that we just can't replace anymore. So an interesting idea there would be, I don't think a Zoom style live video would be great for a tour. because the camera's going to be shaky. It's going to be a bit of a mess. So to your point, I would pre-record a really nice walkthrough and then have the rep just do an intro to it. And then follow up after saying, did you have any questions on the different areas we walked you through in the laboratory, and get their feedback on it. And then you can go more in depth, because I'm sure with a typical tour, when they're allowed to come to the laboratory, they would dive into a certain area. And so let them do that, but do it in an asynchronous way.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, we got a response on that question about the lab. Is that part of it is because of the COVID, people aren't coming to the labs, right? So I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but I get it now. So all right, let's go back to enabling your team. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. So what we do here is, you have to think about going back to that exercise we showed, where it's like, where does video fit into your deal cycle? And then at the beginning, reps are not going to be comfortable. Now, the kind of benefit to some of the work from home stuff that's going on is reps have to be comfortable on video. I haven't seen a camera turned off in a long time now, whereas 6 months ago, half the people that joined our calls would have their Zoom camera turned off, and that's not a good sign when you're selling a video platform. And now everyone's getting more comfortable with it. But what you still need to do is kind of prescribe in the beginning. Okay, your first email should be something like this. Your discovery follow-up should be like this. To your point, it still needs to have next steps. It still needs to have KPIs of why they're buying your product, but also now have this video in here to explain any other key points that they had questions on, follow-ups, just micro demos, whatever they might be. So have some prescription when you're enabling your team to get started. Otherwise, they'll never get started.
Right.
Salespeople, we're a fickle bunch. If I've always done things one way, I'm not going to change unless you show me why and show me how to do it. And if they're not being enabled in that way, expect basically no usage out of that.
Yep. Which this actually comes back to this comfort level, right? Where there's someone asking about, they've got an amazing CSR whose writing skills are not that great, not comfortable getting on video, and wondering if you can substitute an avatar recording through Vidyard, right? Like if you make an avatar of her, but still use her voice. Anything like that available yet, or is that sort of a interesting thing to put on the product wish list?
Yeah, there's been some discussions on what does Zoom call them, where you can like have ears and tongue and stuff like that, but
Right.
It's all just silliness for next April Fools probably. What I would suggest there, I actually had someone join my team that was not comfortable on camera, and so what he ended up doing is he recorded his screen. All of his videos were recording of the screen. You missed that little bubble, you missed that face-to-face, but that's okay. He was still getting his message across. He was still making personal videos without being uncomfortable on screen, and and typically would make them a bit shorter as well. He did, after it was probably 6 months, he started using the little bubble camera on the screen recording, and ended up doing a few at the end of selfie recordings, but he would never use that for prospecting. That was already once he felt comfortable with the customer he was dealing with. He wouldn't use that as the first
I think
phases.
that's great. Particularly with everything going on right now, I call it meeting someone at their space, right? I need to meet that rep at their space, talk about their discomfort, not necessarily try to convince them to change their belief system, but try to find a workaround. And hopefully, to your point, they might start to warm up. If at some point they just sort of put their foot down and say, look, I just can't do video, I'm not going to do video, they can get the job done, let them get the job done. I don't care. Right. But if they can't get the job done and they're not using the tools, well, then it's a different discussion. And I don't like encouraging that these days. But, the reality is that if that's what it's taking to make the sale, then we have to have that uncomfortable conversation and see if there's a different place in the organization for them. So I think you have to sort of, the technology that reps have to now understand how to use is very different than even 10 years ago, very different than 5 years ago. And so the reps have to upskill themselves, whether they like it or not. So,
yeah, when I started at Vidyard, video Zoom calls were not a thing. And I remember back to, what I would be doing on a call is you're like fooling around on Facebook while you're listening to the speakerphone. You can't do that anymore. It's very engaging, and you've got to get used to video. We skipped a couple in here that I just wanted to go back to that are really key. So earlier in the deal cycle, and I kind of put these slides in order of the deal cycle, something to think about, especially if you're kind of early stages, maybe they haven't committed to the next steps, to your point, in your discovery follow-up. You can also try to drive connections through your video. So either drive them to booking a meeting if you're a BDR, SDR, or if you are an account executive, most of my folks will have at the end, a link to some key content. So there's actually a great 6-part series on our website that is all about how to do video for sales. And so a lot of people will have that link show up in their video or beneath their video, however they want to do it. And it's driving that next step. It's driving further engagement with that customer to hopefully make them an opportunity later.
We got a great question coming from Cameron. When you're competing with somebody, right, should you make a video discussing the competitor? And if so, because there could be concern about, showing the differences, but what happens if that gets into your competitor's hands?
Yeah,
right?
That's a great one.
I've got a great answer for this, but I want to hear yours. I'm sure it comes up, right?
It does, yeah. For myself, I've never been a big fan of talking directly about like feature by feature comparison of a competitor. We focus on telling the customer how we're going to help them in our unique way that in the back of our minds, we know our competitors don't do. And so, we typically don't go right head on saying like the feature by feature comparison, especially in our industry. It's a pretty new technology, and the feature by feature really, it just doesn't add up. But what I will say is when if we ever had to make those videos, you can set in certain video platforms how many times that video can be viewed, set a password, which really doesn't protect you because then that customer just sends the password over. Or you can do a request access. So it's like a secure video that they can only access themselves.
Yeah, but that's still, what happens if they send it to the competitor? So here's my answer to that. One, if you're scared of anything you say getting in front of the competitor, then you need to look at the content of what you're saying because you're saying it incorrectly. Do not bash your competitor, ever. If you have a distinct feature that's better than theirs, I would absolutely call it out in the video. I'd kind of be thrilled if my competitor saw it. I'm great friends with John Barrows, good friends with Trish Bertuzzi, good friends with Jocko. We all know each other. We all know our swim lanes too. We know where we are good and we know where the other person's better. So what I would do is I would try to point people to the weakness of the competitor. And I do this even without video. I would say, hey, look, these are the things that people tell us they like about us. So get your customer quotes. Nobody's going to believe you more than they believe your own customers. And then I might say something like, hey, here's what I've heard, but I don't know. You might want to ask the competitor, can they do this? Can they do this? Or how do they do this? Right? And so I think it's okay to send those things in a video. Now, from a competition perspective, I love talking about those things because when someone says, can you do this compared to your competitor? The single first question I should say is, let me ask you that question. How important is knowing that to you making this decision? If it's not that important and they're just curious, great. If they're like, well, it's a pretty important thing, well, then you got to know your swim lane and whether or not you guys can accomplish what they're looking for. So a little bit of sales coaching on this one. I would not worry too much about it getting in front of your competitor. Don't bash them. In sports, right? In basketball, I see this a lot. When they do chalk talk, when they're telling, okay, if you're going to go against, so-and-so on defense, remember, he's right-handed, so push him to the other side. Make him forced to use his left hand, right? That's how you play basketball. It's not like, oh my God, I can't let him shoot threes or whatever. It's more like, well, force him inside or that's how you do this kind of stuff on a competitive level. So anyway, I'll stop there and turn it back over to Dan, but don't ever worry about the competition. Worry about you and where your strengths are.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the one thing that does come up a lot with video questions from our customers is in a highly technical, patented world where it is a piece of technology that is proprietary and you want to control that message. There is ways to control that through video as well. So use, unlisted YouTube, use password protection. As mentioned, those two, your customer can still kind of screw you and send those to somebody. So you'll want to use something that's a bit more secure where it is, one time only or a cookie-based security system. So only their computers can be viewing those videos and obviously get people on an NDA.
Cool.
All right. Now this one is always my favorite one. It is getting really hard to make these videos though, but these are these pass-off videos, these exchange videos. Maybe it's your BDR booking a meeting for an AE, your AE closing a deal and passing it to a CSM, whatever kind of handoff is happening in your business, create a video with those two people. So this is Tom and Greg, and they're just connecting the dots for Lucy. at some fake company. It looks like they've scribbled it out so nobody could read it. But we make these fun videos. It's tough, obviously. We're not in our office anymore. So what we're doing is use a quick Zoom call, have your faces side by side, and do the same thing. It's a little different, and then just use that as the video you're sending and record your Zoom call. But this creates a much better transition. We've all been there. You request a demo on a website, you're talking to Courtney, and then you get on the call and you're like, where's Courtney? I only see Richard. And it's like, oh, sorry, no, Courtney's the SDR. She booked it for Richard. And you're like, oh, okay. And having this where if they had sent you the video introducing Richard before, you know what to expect, you've looked up their profile. Because I do that on the sales side. When I'm buying a product, we're evaluating a bunch of tools right now. I want to know who I'm talking to before I get on that phone and see if I'm connected to them. It's kind of like the reverse of a sales, but I do that when I'm buying a product as well. So just make these fun and intro videos. They're really short, just saying, here's Tom, he's going to help you get your customer, your account set up and go through all the training with you. All right, we already talked about that piece, and we already talked about enabling your team. And so now it's just figuring out how to get this into wherever you're sending and any kind of medium you're using. So whether you're using Drift or SalesLoft or Outreach was mentioned, Outlook, Facebook even, depending on your business, use video throughout these areas and use these areas in their own ways as well. So I send video a lot through LinkedIn, but I also send a lot of normal messages through LinkedIn. And you need to think of how that works in different ways, different platforms, whatever video platform you're using today. There's different ways to communicate through any kind of communication with, to your point earlier and some of the questions that were asked at the beginning where it's like, well, does video play right inside of my Outlook? No, it will inside of LinkedIn and Facebook though. So there's different places where video has a different experience.
Cool.
Yeah. And then this is a little bit of Vidyard stuff that I wanted to throw in at the end. But I actually got reconnected with my first boss ever. Scott Weller managed me when I was 19 at BlackBerry. That's where I started my career. And he reached out the other day saying, well, I need to learn how to use video. Do you have a few minutes? So I jumped on the phone with him and we chatted a lot like this. I sent him some examples afterwards. He must have liked them. He actually watched 100% of that video and it shows up in your email and shows up in Chrome. So you can see which of your deals are actually engaging with your content. So you know where to spend your time instead of, guessing on which deal or only reaching out to the biggest deals that you have. You'll know when they engage. And the key thing here, whether you're using SalesLoft to do click tracking or whatever it might be, is when somebody's watching your video, reach out to them and see if they have any questions after, because they're at their computer right now with headphones on. So perfect time for you to reach out and have a conversation with them.
I've been saying this
creepy way, but
I've been telling Max and Manny for I don't know how long that as soon as someone opens my email, if I'm in dialing mode, I want it to automatically just call somebody right away. Like just have Outreach do that for me, right? Make the dialer click as soon as they open the email, right? It is silly not to do that. And I love your concept of doing it with video too, because you're top of mind. They're watching the video. Like, why wouldn't you do that? So I love that you guys promote that.
Yeah, it's a fine line of when you do call, you're not just saying, hey, I saw you open my email. You ready to talk? Just have a conversation.
Yep. You can easily make that the coincidence conversation, right? Like now, if you're selling to someone like Vidyard or Outreach or, another SaaS platform, they probably know that that it was open. So, be mindful of it, but I wouldn't worry about it.
Exactly.
So,
So a couple of the customers I wanted to talk about. Lauren here, she's actually at a new company now, but when she was at Dynamic Signal, her biggest thing was the meeting cancellations, very similar to Salesforce's example I gave earlier, where she was finding the BDR booking a meeting for the account executive, that handoff just wasn't working well. And so that's where they used video to take that no-show rate from 50% down to 10%. Now that's pretty drastic. I would say if you're getting 50%, you really need to think about how that handoff is working. And there's probably other things broken, and video is not just going to magic wand that away. But she did a great job of making sure that was fixed.
Got it. Cool. I love this. I got a couple more questions coming, but go ahead and go through these because this is what we're talking about. It's what your customers say, right?
Yeah, exactly. This one is League. They're a healthcare provider, healthcare insurance provider. And obviously there is millions of them, and so they use it to make sure that they're getting their message across in a different way and in a more impactful way. So they kind of cut through that noise of all the different insurance companies that are out there right now, to make sure that they're the ones getting that response. And they do it in a very unique way. They have a mobile app, and it's very, new age, tech forward. And so they use video to showcase that to the HR leaders and get their message heard. Cool. Yeah, so let's answer some questions.
Yeah, so a couple more questions that have come in so far. Can you guys do sort of a deeper analysis to say, hey, in this market, we see video working really well versus that market? Like I assume behind the scenes, you guys can aggregate open and play rates and that kind of stuff. And then in theory, maybe determine if there's market related data.
Yeah, the one thing with our data, because we're a SaaS platform, is we can only do really high level analytics on it. So we do release an annual video report that explains that. What we can't do is we can't relate the data to our actual customers' data points. Obviously, they need to be separated.
Your customers, right?
Yeah, so we can't see industries, things like that. So we don't have industry specific data just from a security standpoint. Anecdotally, we have a ton of insurance, a ton of banks and loans, and these kind of industries that are, I don't want to downplay them, but they are a bit commoditized. And so they are trying to differentiate themselves from the others in a very unique way. And that's where video comes into play. Yeah. But about half of our business is high tech. Obviously, they're usually more complex systems. They need to be explained in a, not virtual way, but in a vision where you can actually see what the product does or have an explainer there, as opposed to a physical product, which video is usually not as necessary. Although GE and some of the larger brands are now getting into product demos and physical videos of their product to help with their messaging. I hear my daughter awake now.
Yeah, I couldn't hear. So what about, and this may have to go to the conversation about the avatar, but how about illustrations, right? Like if you go and create explainer videos and stuff like that, can you drop that into a Vidyard, or do you guys have the capability to make some explainer videos?
Yeah, our video creation ability is basically screen recording or webcam. So whatever product you do to do whiteboarding videos, you could make that in Vidyard. For the most part, I would suggest making that video, doing a bit of editing, and then loading that in, as we talked about earlier, where there's kind of pre-canned content that you're layering on top with a little intro. I find that would be a lot more professional when you're doing more of an explainer style.
Got it. Another question, follow up from Joseph, which is, I'm seeing when the video is viewed, but not who's actually seeing it. Is that a feature in a paid version of Vidyard?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I have to make a guess because I can't interact with you, but you're probably using it inside HubSpot, or you're sending it to multiple people. So much like Marketo emails, that kind of thing. When you send it to multiple people, we don't know exactly which person watched the video. We just have one tracking script in that email. So one of those 3 people watched it. And then there is an issue right now in HubSpot that's being fixed later this month, where when you're sending using HubSpot sequences, they don't tell us who the recipient is. So we can't tell you who watched the video just for security reasons. And they're finding a secure way to pass us that information.
Got it. What, and that comes back to I think a question that came way earlier, which was CRM. Any particular CRM work better or worse with something like your platform, or are they all fairly agnostic and then they just get buggy and we have to figure it out together with their developers?
From a CRM perspective, if you want to push the data back into the lead and contact records, Salesforce and HubSpot are the best 2 options. We don't push that data automatically into Outlook or into Dynamics, is what it's called. So both of those platforms work really well. From a sending perspective, Outreach, Zant, all of the platforms that have sales automation have our product built into it now. There's really no benefit of one versus the other, especially from a free version perspective. Once you get into the enterprise version, Outreach has some really interesting features where you can, to your point, automatically trigger emails based on views. I don't know if you can automatically trigger a phone call or not, but you can automatically trigger an email if a view happens. And then that email could reference the fact that they viewed the video.
Got it. What So a couple of people have asked, what's the difference between the free version and the paid version? And I know, we promised this isn't a product pitch, but someone in the audience asked, and I verified that person doesn't work for you on LinkedIn. That is not a loaded question. Um, what are some
Yeah.
differences in paid versus free versions of the different platforms?
Yeah, so the free version, basically it's unlimited length, unlimited videos. There's really no difference on your ability to send videos. There's features that are changed where when you're using our free product, just like any free product, you're basically advertising for us. So you're the person you're sending it to will see Vidyard branding. They'll have calls to action to have them become Vidyard users as well. So if you want to control the brand, control the experience, that's in the paid versions. The call to action I showed earlier, where you're driving them to a next step, driving them to book a meeting, that's in the paid version. And then a lot of our security functionality that we've talked about in different ways is typically in our enterprise version, but we are offering that for free right now for 90 days because of the COVID situation. So if anyone needs a secure way to communicate video internally, you can head to vidyard.com/internal video, and an account will get created for you, whether you want to do single sign-on or IP restrictions or whatever you need to be able to communicate with your team when everyone's working from home.
Got it. I got two more questions. One is, would you ever feel that it's big brother to call them when they see the video? Dan, what do you guys coach your team to do? Do you tell them to wait 10 minutes or do you call them?
On the BDR and SDR side, we call them right away. There is no hesitation. The account
And what do
executive
they
side,
say? Does your BDR, SDR say, hey, Dan, I just saw you watch my video? Or do they just sort of ignore it and make it more of the coincidence? Because I think it has more to do, Terry, with what you say and how you say it than whether or not you do it.
yeah. So we say we saw you watch the video. I would not suggest our customers do that. We're doing it to show the power of our own platform, but from your perspective, if you're doing it, just make it a coincidence.
Got it. So I think it's totally fine to call them and you can say whatever you're comfortable saying. But I think the most important thing, Terry, is that you try it 5 or 10 times, not every time. And I wouldn't try it on your best customer. Look, if it's Coca-Cola and you see they open the video, I don't know that I call them right there. Let's try it with some of your lower tier, your tier 3s customers, so that if something goes awkward, you aren't hurting yourself. So I would just say try it, right, is the most important thing. Another question came in about security, right? Big enterprise companies are always concerned about security. They're concerned about all kinds of things. Any best tips or best practices around, choosing something like Vidyard? What kind of questions should you be asking from a security point of view about the platform, like a Vidyard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on what you're going to be using it for. So ourselves, we had to go through a ton of security compliance because of all the big banks we work with Salesforce.com, with all of that. And it's because we track individuals. So we have access to individual private information. If you're going with a video platform that is a bit higher level, more basic, doesn't track individuals, you have less security concerns and less need for those security pieces if you're not using it for internal, if you're using it for sales. So it just depends on what level you really need. For ourselves, if we're integrated into Salesforce, connected into Xant or Outreach or any of those, and automating a lot of the things that go on, we have to be hyper secure, and we go through security reviews every day of the week to make sure that we're up to speed on that. So things you need to think about is the video platform I'm looking for going to touch personal information? If it is, then you might want to think of a more secure one like ourselves. If, as I mentioned, the insurance and banking industry that we work with, the videos themselves can have personal information in them. That one's a big one. And we actually work with a third-party vendor that will actually ingest the video content and make sure that there's compliance in that video to ensure they're, the financial advisor is not saying things they're not supposed to. So you really have to just kind of watch on what type of videos and what information is going to be included in it.
Cool. That's awesome, Dan. And so thank you so much for tons of information. Thanks for letting me interrupt and rant a few times. Thanks to everybody for attending this. We really appreciate everybody's attention and time. I know this is recorded. I know it'll be sent out. Love the active chat. By the way, everybody who told me what pains you solved, you didn't. You told me what you do. Go back to the drawing board. Call me if you need help with it. But definitely get in touch with Dan and Vidyard. Like, these guys know what they're doing. They have the best practices. And I think it's absolutely worth trying. right? It's everything has changed in the world, so you might as well give it a shot. Thank you again, Dan, and thanks to Sales Hacker for sponsoring this with you and supporting in this community.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
Awesome. Talk to you next time, Dan.